A good rule of thumb from our standpoint is if a property is not going to generate at least $1,000 a month, like net cash flow after all expenses, rent, utilities, supplies, maids, everything, if it's not going to do at least that, we won't even look at it.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Another very exciting episode in store for you today. A little bit more on the pessimistic, negative side of things, but a very realistic conversation to be having, which is why do we hate Airbnbs? Why do we hate short-term rentals? We made a video previous to this, why we love the short-term rental business model and how it's served us. It's actually led both myself and my guests today to financial freedom. And I imagine that's why 95% or more of the people that come to my channel do so, is because you're interested in some version of financial freedom for yourself and freedom of choice, allowing money to be a tool for you to achieve the exact lifestyle design that you want. That's what it's been for us, for myself and my two guests here today. This is Michael and Katrina. They are highly successful short-term rental specialists. They've broken the $1 million mark at this point, have accomplished phenomenal things by anybody's standards of being small business owners. But really, this is great even if you have absolutely no experience. This can be great even if you want to increase your current earnings by a couple $1,000 a month, if you want an extra $10,000 a month, and really the sky is the limit on this thing. Make sure you go back to the why we like short-term rentals for all of those good pieces of information if you're looking for the more optimistic side of this. Today, that's not our focus at all, okay? Today is where is the bad and the ugly in this thing. And so that's what I'm going to try and pick Michael and Katrina's brains about. I obviously have my own examples of it. Thankfully, it's been fairly minimal. If we have time, I'll tell a story about that. But for now, let's go ahead and just turn it over to them. Guys, by the way, before we do, I want you guys to have contact to Michael and Katrina. Everybody I bring onto the channel, I essentially force them through threats that they have to make themselves available to you. So be sure to reach out through BNB Bootcamp at VIPfinancialeducation.com. Reaching out costs you nothing. If you are serious about opening a business of your own and you like the idea of short-term rentals to do it, you like the idea of walking alongside people who have made $1 million doing it in only 2 years, then you'll want to send that email. If you're not serious and if you don't like any of those things, then please don't send an email. Otherwise, make sure you include your first and last name and your phone number so that they can reach out to you guys. And that is our gift today for you guys spending your time with us on this video. So let's go ahead and turn it over. What would be some of the reasons that you guys have not really enjoyed this business model over the last couple of years?
Well, the first reason, like as much as you can make an argument for why we love it, we're going to put it in the reason why we hate it. And reason number one sometimes honestly is people in this business. There's, and what I mean specifically by that is, I mean, at the core of what short-term rentals is you're essentially letting complete strangers into people's homes, right? Now, at this point, we've hosted probably 1,300 plus reservations, and I would say 99+% has been wonderful, fantastic,
phenomenal.
Had amazing experiences, but you don't get to 7 figures without getting a few scars along the way. So,
1% of 1,300 is a lot of stories.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you quite recently here, we had a situation where we're driving back from Vancouver. We were doing some business out there and, doing some 2021 planning. We get a call like as we're driving back, and this lady is just like totally hysterical.
Freaking out.
And we're just like, well, what's going on? And she just said, listen, the guest I had in your suite, he had a little bit of an episode and yeah, he ended up flooding your suite and causing quite a bit of damage. And we're just like, well,
what do you mean? And he's like, well, he kind of freaked out when he saw a little bit of a leak and decided to take it out on your suite.
Yeah. So without long story short, this was a woman where she was like a social worker and she had a gentleman under her care where he's one of these people that needs to be watched at all times kind of thing. For whatever reason, she decided to leave him alone. And basically what happened, there was a minor leak in our dishwasher. And, normally you would just turn it off and mop it up and call someone and someone would come fix it. Due to some of the mental health challenge this individual had, he, instead of turning the machine off, he literally ripped the countertop off of the kitchen to get access to the dishwasher.
It's ripped in half.
Yeah, and then pulled the dishwasher out, which of course the water lines are still running. So then the water is spewing all over the suite. and it was running, I guess, for about an hour. So the entire suite is flooded. But because, again, just with the personality at play, he got quite frustrated with this. So
Oh
he
man.
decided
Well,
to
my
smash our
story's pale.
TV.
My story's
Yeah.
pale in comparison to that one. Short of death, somebody actually dying in your property, that's about the worst case scenario.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
However, ultimately, even though that's something we hate about it, there is ways to mitigate it. You are covered up to $1 million in host protection and liability insurance. So we are completely covered for that whole claim. So,
I mean, we're still working through that situation right now. So, I mean, ultimately, yeah, it's inconvenient for sure. And,
you just need to know how to mitigate it.
Yeah.
Is the $1 million that you've made so far, has that made that incident worth it?
Yes. Well, yes. And
Okay.
when I say $1 million, you're covered up to $1 million through the Airbnb.
Yeah.
But the $1 million you've made over the last 2 years, was that incident worth it?
Yes.
100%. And I mean, ultimately, like, there is no perfect business where every day is happy and just rainbows and sunshine, and like everyone's just going to treat you wonderfully and you're not going to have any problems. Like I would say to anyone, if you want to have less problems in your life, don't start any business ever. Like, don't even start a hot dog stand. Just don't do it, because the amount of problems that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, like, it's never ending. But I mean, if you like what you do, as we do, it becomes a labor of love. And I mean, this one incident was probably the worst one we had ever had, but we've been through the process so many times with guests. We're just like, okay, well, we already know what to do, and here's what
that was
it
your
looks
first
like.
guest. If that was your first guest, chances are you might have quit, right? That could have been enough deal breaker. But the fact that you guys had worked through, you've been through some other challenges, I think that's a really good point you make. If you want to go into business, you do not have to enjoy problems. I don't know entrepreneurs that enjoy the problems. What we do enjoy is solving them, which you do need to be able to welcome that responsibility of being a professional problem solver. And that's, I think, what you were sort of saying there. But yeah, don't go into business if you don't want problems. And if you don't want problems, don't work with people, because you'll definitely have problems. I had a guy that by the time I was done with my walkthrough, they were already unloading a U-Haul. And I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be one of our least enjoyable guests. And they were probably the least enjoyable guests. We got a 5-star rating and they left the house surprisingly clean. But the experience of having them there put a lot of stress on us. We were worried about our place the whole time. It really wasn't fun. And, it did make us kind of second guess, is this something we really want to be doing? But once we got through it and we saw, hey, we pulled through, and, we'll just worry less the next time.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, we're of the opinion and belief that, I mean, people are inherently good, but I mean, it's just when you host over 1,300 reservations, it's just, the law of averages does come into play. And although the amount of incidents that we had, like, I could probably still count them, on both set of hands here. It's just, you're just playing with numbers at that point in time.
So the first one is obviously professional problem solving, right? You're going to have bad guests from time to time. What would be a second reason that short-term rentals haven't necessarily been all it's cracked up to be along the way?
Yeah, I would say that with Airbnb and short-term rentals, it is a very low barrier to entry. So really anyone can do this. Anyone can have a property, take photos, and throw the listing up. So, I mean, with that, that's not what we really like about short-term rentals, in the way that you can have a lot of competition as well, because really anyone can do this. So
it's kind of a pro and a con. Anybody listening could get involved.
For sure.
It means that the market could get flooded too, right?
Exactly. And in some ways here, with low barriers to entry, when short-term rentals were just coming on the scene, you used to be able to literally have, like, throw up a listing, have grandma's furniture, and you would get booked and make tons of money. That's not the case quite so anymore.
Yeah. I mean, the expectations as far as what guests are wanting is going up, like, steadily every single year. So what's really important is that it's not something, I mean, it's something to be cognizant of, but all it really means is that you just have to be on your A game and ensuring that you're always looking to improve. You're always,
looking to give that experience and taking it to the next level of what you're actually offering.
Because I mean, ultimately with any
way to stand out, right?
100%. Because I mean, ultimately, no matter what opportunity you're looking at, as soon as people discover that there's, quote, easy money to be made, you're going to have a lot more participants chase into that market until the, the easy money is, quote, gone. And then the people that are, just interested, not committed, eventually they'll drop off. And then, the players that know what they're doing are going to maintain their market share and, actually have a real business. So that's the whole thing of what we talk about.
To truly earning a great reputation, really good reviews. Because I would imagine in the early stages, one bad review could probably ruin a listing.
Yes. Your first 3 reviews are key. If you blow it on the first 3 reviews, it's so hard to recover.
Is it possible that it would make better sense to just take it down and start over if you get a bad review?
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, like, Airbnb still keeps a record of every single property. So it's not like it's a fresh start necessarily, because they know that you've tried on this one in the past. So you do naturally get a bit of a bump off a brand new listing in the start, because they want to say, like, okay, let's give this person a shot and see how it's going to go. Like, if they see, like, you have a new listing, it's not booking, and if it does get bookings, like, the guests aren't having a good experience, you're
going to go down on the list quick.
You're going to become much, more invisible very quickly. And it's not to say it's impossible to turn that around, but, it's, the old phrase is, if you want to get out of a hole, stop digging. That's kind of what you're up against at that point. So.
And that is no different than any other search engine optimization, essentially, right? So you want to try and be on the top of the search engine when guests are looking for a property that matches your description, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
What else would kind of create choppy waters here?
So there are certain situations, and this would be the third reason why we sometimes hate short-term rentals, is that Airbnb and short-term rentals is a very disruptive technology and idea, right? Because it basically displaces hotels and, just gives the consumer more options. But it also can create issues in neighborhoods, and there are certain people that do not like having a short-term rental in their specific neighborhood. So what we've seen come into play is that because the technology's kind of gone like this, the regulations and everything else and rules around how to actually govern short-term rentals is finally starting to catch up in a lot of markets. So this is a risk we need to be cognizant of. So the third thing is what we call regulatory risk. Now, having said that, most markets that we've seen across North America and various parts of Europe are very short-term rental friendly, but we are going to see more regulations come into this space, particularly probably around business licensing. Sometimes they might require the owner to be on site. You might be limited of a certain number of days of year that you can do this. Now, that's not most places. That's a very small segment of markets, but these are things that need to be taken into account before you start getting a short-term rental business up and going.
Yeah.
And ours still require a license.
Yes, and a little bit on the regulatory side as well. I mean, this is where you really have to know your exit strategy, and also what we do. Like, we don't own property ultimately here, right? So we're already negating our risk. We want to make sure that if we need to get out, we can, and to do it safely, and to make sure that our business can still be successful. Not, owning a ton of properties in one area that suddenly, kind of diversifying your portfolio and making sure that you're able to sustain your business ultimately.
Yeah. So, I mean, ourselves personally being aware that, rules can change through time. This is part of our strategy, is to start diversifying into different markets across not only Canada, but we're pushing into the United States. So it's just something to be aware of. It's not so necessarily something to fear, but you just have to know before you get started, just what the rules and regulations look like.
I think that's huge. I mean, exit strategy is very important. And you touched on something that we mentioned in the last video, which is you do not actually own these properties. And that is a very unique aspect of Michael and Katrina's business model. For more information about that, make sure you check the link in the description below. I'll put the 2 first conversations that we had with them about their business model and how it actually works down there for you, because it's extremely important for you guys to understand some of the perks about what they're doing. They are building a business without taking on all of the headwind of being the homeowner. That means 20% down payments. That means closing costs. That means maintenance on the home. Now, granted, they forfeit the appreciation speculation on that property, and I think it's a very wise trade-off. And they can then take the proceeds from what we call a short-term net cash flow solution, where they can make huge amounts of money, tens of thousands per month, if not six figures or more per month. And they can go out and they can buy their own long-term real estate if they chose to. It's two completely separate investment classes. One's long-term, one's short-term. Ultimately, folks, this is a really important distinction to understand. So watch all the videos in this series is very important, but it does take a lot less cash out of pocket to get involved the way these two are. So talk a little bit more about what are some of the downsides to this, if anything else.
So the fourth point that we want to bring to people's attention is that what's really important with short-term rentals is that you need to have a pricing strategy. So the fourth point is that the earnings in this business can be volatile at times. And what I mean by that specifically is that depending on where you live, there can be very definitive differences in seasonality. So depending on when people start the business, they might be coming into a high season and then they're just like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world. I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. And then, the season starts to flip. And if you don't know how to adapt in those times, then all of a sudden you'd be like, oh my God, what did I do? This is the worst idea ever.
So really what Michael's saying here is it's good to have a plan to deal with both environments, when the market is hot and then when it's not so hot. So it's really how to make sure you're booked and you still have bookings coming in the slow season, and what strategies are going to implement both in the high and low season. So
is this partly projecting when you're going in and you're running your numbers to decide whether or not a property is a good fit for your portfolio? You're obviously averaging out projections, right? You're averaging out seasonality to determine sort of what those net cash flows would be.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah. So a good rule of thumb, from our standpoint, is if a property is not going to generate at least $1,000 a month, like net cash flow after all expenses, rent, utilities, supplies, maids, everything, if it's not going to do at least that, we won't even look at it. Because if you're looking at short-term versus long-term, both have their advantages, pros and cons, but the amount of work that's involved on the short-term side is considerably more than it would be with the long-term tenants. So with the amount of work that you're doing and, in some cases, potential risk you might be taking, you want to make sure that you're being compensated for that fairly, right? Mm-hmm. So in our case, that's kind of our general benchmark of what we aim at before we look at taking on a deal. If it's not going to do that, we won't look at it.
And that's a very conservative number of $1,000. So that's our minimum benchmark. And that's the average, like you said, of over the 12 months. But we want to make sure we're at least making that. But in some cases, we've seen upwards of 5 to 6, even to 8,000 net cash flow per month on one property.
Sometimes people come into business ownership with the same W-2 mindset that they had before, where they earn a consistent paycheck every time. That's just not how it works when you're a business owner. So you got to be prepared for planning, for budgeting, using averages, accurate and conservative. If you're conservatively accurate, projections, all of this stuff is very important. Guys, make sure that you email Michael and Katrina if you'd like to start your own Airbnb business without having to come up with 20% down payments, oftentimes without having to rely on your credit, so it doesn't matter if it's bad. Guys, this is a really unique and revolutionary way to be in the industry of short-term rentals and take it from people who have already passed $1 million of earnings in just 2 years in the business. Two of the nicest people that I work with. Send an email, BNB Bootcamp at VIPfinancialeducation.com. That's in the description below. Put a name and a phone number in the email so that they can get a hold of you. And that's a no pressure consultation to find out what your objectives are and see if you're a right fit for it. All right, guys. Thank you again. As always, I can't tell you how much we always appreciate you. Thank you for being here on the channel and sharing this great information with our audience. They love you too. We've had nothing but great feedback from everybody. So we do appreciate it. And we'll bring you back on for some more great content.
Thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on. Thank you.
Always, guys. Thank you too. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.